Let's say you've moved to Germany for a year, and you're still working hard to learn German. You're starting to feel a little homesick, so you decide you're going to make your grandma's famous apple pie for dessert. But when you get to the grocery store, you realize you don't know the word for apple, and you don't have your phone with you to Google the answer. So you ask the clerk for a bag of fruit instead, hoping they understand what you mean. The clerk brings you grapes, then oranges, then bananas, before finally bringing you a bag of apples. That's because the words you used didn't make a lot of sense to the grocery store clerk. Words are one of the main ways we communicate, and whether we're speaking, writing, or signing, the way we choose and use words is shaped by language. I'm Cassandra Ryder, and this is Study Hall, Intro to Human Communication. There are thousands of unique languages in the world, but the thing they all have in common is that people use them to communicate with others. Language is a system we use to express ideas by combining sounds, gestures, and symbols into words, phrases, and sentences. You know, like I'm doing right now. In fact, most of us use thousands of words every day to create and share meaning with one another. But what is a word exactly? Well, words are symbols that stand in for something else, like a physical object or idea. And we can use words to communicate verbally in writing or through gestures. For example, you could speak the word apple to show that you're thinking about a juicy fruit with a red peel. You could also communicate the word apple with written symbols by putting the letters A-P-P-L-E together. And you could use hand signs to represent an apple like this. In all three cases, the word apple is a symbol that stands in for the actual fruit. Like, you could call an apple a blurg, and it wouldn't change the fact that you're talking about a red, crunchy, sweet fruit. That's because English speakers have all agreed that the word apple represents or symbolizes a very specific fruit, which is why that's the word we use when we want to add apples to our grocery order. It's probably hard to imagine a time when you didn't know that the word apple represents the fruit. But when you were young, an adult probably taught you the word apple by showing you a picture of the fruit and helping you sound out the letters. And over time, you learn to associate the word apple with, well, actual apples. Most languages have hundreds of thousands of words, so we have to go through the mental process of learning which words represent which objects and ideas over and over and over again. But learning words and what they mean is just one part of using language. Language also involves combining words into phrases and sentences, which can get tricky. We can't just put random words together and expect other people to understand what we mean. For example, if I said apple fruit juicy favorite yum yum, you'd probably be pretty confused. That's why languages have rules that help us put words together in ways that other people can understand. The rules that tell us how to combine words into phrases and sentences within a language are called grammar. Grammatical systems are made up of smaller sets of rules that build on each other to help us arrange words to create meaning, which is why there are a lot of grammar rules in every language. And if you speak more than one language, which is called multilingualism, you have to learn even more rules. So many rules. The good news is that these rules can be arranged into tiers, where the sounds we combine to make words are at the bottom and the sentences we put together to communicate are at the top. You can imagine it like the Great Pyramid of grammar, and it's divided into phonology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. The foundational level of a grammar system is phonology, which is the study of the units of sounds called phonemes. Phonology is at the bottom of the grammar pyramid because we have to learn how to make sounds before we can make words. Like, as babies, we start out making sounds like ah, but over time we learn that we can combine the ah sound with the p sound and the ul sound to say apple. Or when signing, we learn to make hand shapes, movements, and holds that we can combine to make words like apple. Every language has its own set of phonemes that are used in consistent ways so that other speakers know what you're saying. For example, in Latin American Spanish, the letter Z is pronounced the same way that the letter S is pronounced in English. So if you're an English speaker trying to pronounce manzana, the Spanish word for apple, you have to know the phonemic rule that the letter Z is pronounced like an S in Spanish. Otherwise, you won't pronounce the word right. Tone, or the use of pitch, is another way that languages distinguish between the sounds used to pronounce words. For instance, Thai is a tonal language where the tone and inflection you place on the syllables of a word help to convey its meaning. And in Thai, apun is the word for apple. But to pronounce it correctly, we'd have to note that the first syllable should be pronounced in a high tone and the second syllable in a falling tone. In Thai, low tones are pitched lower than your typical speaking voice, and a falling tone starts higher than your speaking voice, rises a bit, then falls back below the pitch you started with. So the Thai word for apple sounds like this, apun. To pronounce words correctly in a tonal language, you have to use the right sounds and hit the right pitch. And like we mentioned earlier, how we arrange words affects their meaning too. That leads us to the next level of the grammar pyramid, known as syntax. Syntax is the set of rules that helps us organize words into phrases and sentences that other people can understand. Like if you said, "Pineapple ate I," it might be tough to figure out what you mean, unless you're Yoda, and then it still might be tough to figure out what you mean. Even though that sentence is made up of real English words, they aren't arranged in a way that makes sense in English syntax. To be coherent, you would need to rearrange that sentence so that it starts with a subject, in this case, I, that's followed by the verb ate. Then you would add the object of the sentence, which is a delicious, amazing apple pie. So when we arrange the sentence into the correct syntax, it says, "I ate apple pie." "Pineapple ate I" and "I ate apple pie" are sentences that contain the exact same words, but one is confusing and the other makes sense just because of the way the words are arranged. Then there's the third level of the grammar pyramid, which is semantics, or the study of meaning. Semantics looks at how we choose words and arrange them into sentences that are effective at getting our intended meaning across. Let's say you spent all Saturday baking the perfect apple pie, just like your grandma taught you. While you're daydreaming about winning the Great British Bake Off, your roommate walks in grumbling about being super hungry. Since you're feeling pretty generous, you say, "Help yourself to some pie." But they could interpret that as an invitation to eat the whole pie. And then you'd have to get a new roommate, which would be really inconvenient. To save yourself an empty stomach and a roommate search, you could say, "Help yourself to a slice of pie" instead. The difference between some and a slice may seem subtle, but it's big enough that it totally changes how your roommate responds to the invitation, which is why semantics is so important to communication. Finally, the top level of the pyramid is pragmatics, which covers the way that context affects how we use the rules of phonology, syntax, and semantics to communicate effectively. Like, say you're having a conversation about the best apple pie recipes with your roommate. As you describe your grandma's apple pie, your roommate might interject sounds like "uh-huh" and to signal that they're paying attention. Then, when you nod towards your roommate, they start talking about their favorite apple pie recipe. Your roommate knows that English speakers often use nonverbal cues to invite someone else to speak during a conversation. So when you nodded, they took that as a sign that it was their turn to talk about apple pie. So pragmatics helps us understand how the elements of language work together so we can share our ideas and recipes clearly. Pragmatics also deals with the ways that we're creative with language rules, like when we use figures of speech to get our point across. Let's go back to that time you offered your roommate some pie. If the pie was hot out of the oven, you might warn them, "Watch out, the filling is lava." If your roommate interpreted that statement using semantics, they'd likely conclude that your perfect pie is filled with red-hot magma. But pragmatics is all about how understanding how language can be used creatively to share what we mean. That's why your roommate understands that your pie is just too hot to eat, not actually volcanic. At the end of the day, grammar rules exist so that humans who speak the same language can communicate. These language rules help us understand each other, which means they also shape how other people perceive us. For instance, people tend to make assumptions about our credibility or trustworthiness based on what we say and how we say it. Using language clearly and choosing our words carefully can help us build trust with other people in different situations. Like, you probably know that using slang and run-on sentences wouldn't go over well in a research paper for school. But if you're making a YouTube tutorial on how to bake the best apple pie, using casual language might enhance your credibility because it makes you seem relatable and fun. The way we talk about our feelings and emotions affects how other people perceive us too. Sharing our emotions shows that we're willing to be honest and vulnerable, which can signal to others that we value our relationships. But the way we use language to share our emotions is really important, and talking about our feelings can backfire if we don't choose our words carefully. Like when you were a toddler, your parents probably didn't feel great about you screaming, "I hate you," because they wouldn't let you have a second slice of pie. But they were probably patient with your tantrum because they knew your little brain was still developing an emotional vocabulary. A solid emotional vocabulary gives you the words that you need to describe your feelings in a way that's honest and kind. Like when you screamed at your parents about dessert, they probably tried to teach you to use words like mad or frustrated to express your feelings instead, which is a much more accurate and nicer use of language. As we expand our emotional vocabulary to include more words and ways to use them, we can get better at expressing our feelings to the people in our lives. And that is a great way to connect better with others, which is the ultimate goal of communication. Learning the rules of the languages we speak sets the foundation for communicating effectively throughout our lives. And because humans are dynamic, so are our languages, which means that the languages we speak are always growing and changing, just like we are. Thanks for watching Study Hall, Intro to Human Communication, which is part of the Study Hall project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you liked this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time!